Sometimes destiny does not arrive wearing a crown. Sometimes it waits beneath chains that everyone else is too afraid to touch. Rain poured over Black Hollow with a steady rhythm, turning the narrow dirt roads into shallow streams that reflected flashes of distant lightning. The small mountain village had fallen unusually silent, not because of the storm, but because of what rested inside the old iron enclosure at the center of the square. Villagers gathered beneath wooden awnings, whispering nervously while keeping their distance. No one dared step closer. Behind the thick rusted bars lay an enormous silver beast, its powerful body stained with dried blood and rainwater, heavy iron chains wrapped around its legs. Even lying still, it carried a quiet presence that made every heartbeat seem louder. Some claimed it was cursed. Others insisted it was a monster that had wandered down from the Forbidden Mountains. None of them truly knew. They only knew that no one wanted to be the first to approach it. Emily Carter tightened the faded shawl around her shoulders as she crossed the square carrying a wooden bucket filled with warm water, clean cloths, and fresh herbs gathered that morning. At 23 years old, the young White Omega had spent most of her life unnoticed. She cleaned homes, washed clothes, and quietly helped anyone who needed an extra pair of hands. Few people remembered to thank her, but she had never expected recognition. Kindness had simply become part of who she was. As she neared the enclosure, anxious voices quickly surrounded her. "Do not go in there," an elderly merchant warned, shaking his head. "Whatever that thing is, it should be left alone." Another villager stepped backward, refusing even to look toward the cage. "It has frightened every hunter who came near it. Let the soldiers deal with it." Emily looked through the rain toward the silent creature. Instead of anger, she noticed exhaustion. Instead of danger, she saw slow breathing and tired silver eyes barely open beneath tangled strands of wet fur. Whatever it truly was, it looked more injured than threatening. She quietly thanked the villagers for their concern before lifting the heavy iron latch. The old gate groaned as it slowly opened. Every conversation in the square stopped at once. Rain continued falling as Emily stepped inside alone. The enormous beast did not move. She carefully placed the wooden bucket on the ground several feet away before kneeling without sudden movement. Her hands remained visible, her voice soft enough to blend with the rain. "I am only here to help," she whispered. The silver eyes opened completely for the first time, watching her with surprising calm. Emily dipped a clean cloth into the warm water and gently reached toward one blood-stained shoulder, pausing just long enough to let the creature refuse if it wished. It never pulled away. Slowly she began washing away layers of dirt and dried blood, revealing healthy silver fur beneath. The beast remained perfectly still, as though it had been waiting not for someone stronger, but for someone unafraid to offer compassion. Hidden beneath the hood of a dark traveling cloak, a lone stranger stood beneath the shelter of an ancient oak tree at the edge of the square. His sharp blue eyes never left the young Omega or the mysterious creature inside the cage. As another patch of dried blood disappeared beneath Emily's careful hands, something faint shimmered beneath the silver fur, almost invisible beneath the rain. The stranger's expression changed instantly. What he had searched for across countless kingdoms was no ordinary beast, and the quiet young woman kneeling beside it had unknowingly become part of a destiny far older than either of them could possibly imagine. Emily Carter continued moving the warm cloth across the creature's broad shoulder with slow, careful motions, allowing every touch to remain gentle enough that it would never mistake compassion for fear. Rain tapped softly against the iron bars while thin streams of water carried away the last traces of dried blood, revealing fur that shimmered like polished silver beneath the gray afternoon sky. The enormous beast remained completely still. Its steady breathing had become calmer, and the guarded tension that had surrounded it only moments earlier slowly faded beneath the quiet rhythm of Emily's patient care. Outside the enclosure, the villagers watched with growing disbelief. No hunter had managed to stand that close. No one had even dared reach toward the chained creature without trembling. Yet the young White Omega, whose quiet kindness had so often gone unnoticed, knelt beside it as though she were simply comforting an injured animal abandoned by the roadside. She dipped another clean cloth into the wooden bucket before gently rinsing a deep stain from the creature's neck. As the water flowed across its thick silver fur, faint glowing lines briefly appeared beneath the surface before disappearing once again. Emily paused only long enough to notice the unusual shimmer. She assumed it was merely a trick of the rain reflecting against the fading daylight. Without another thought, she continued cleaning the enormous guardian with the same quiet dedication she brought to every task in her ordinary life. The beast slowly lowered its massive head until it rested peacefully upon the damp ground only a few feet away from her. Its silver eyes never left her face. They no longer carried suspicion. Instead, they reflected something almost forgotten, as though the creature were remembering the comfort of simple kindness after countless lonely years. Emily offered a small reassuring smile. "You have been carrying this pain for a long time, have you not?" she whispered softly. The guardian released a slow breath that drifted into the cool air like a cloud of silver mist. It made no threatening movement, only closed its eyes for a brief moment while Emily carefully washed another patch of matted fur. Hidden beneath the shelter of the ancient oak tree, the hooded traveler remained perfectly still. His sharp blue eyes narrowed as more of the glowing markings quietly emerged beneath the creature's coat. They were ancient symbols nearly invisible beneath the rain, yet unmistakable to anyone who knew the oldest legends of the northern kingdoms. He had searched forgotten mountains, abandoned temples, and distant forests for years without success. Now those sacred markings were revealing themselves before an ordinary village because of a young woman who did not even realize what she had awakened. His calm expression gave way to quiet astonishment. "It cannot be," he murmured under his breath. "The guardian only answers a heart without fear." A cold breeze swept across the square, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding mountains. The villagers instinctively stepped farther away as the silver glow beneath the guardian's fur grew slightly brighter with every careful touch Emily offered. No roar echoed through the village. No terrifying display followed. Instead, the atmosphere became strangely peaceful, as though the storm itself had begun losing its strength. Even the falling rain softened into a gentle drizzle. Emily reached for another clean cloth before carefully brushing tangled strands of wet fur away from the creature's face. For the first time, she saw the remarkable beauty hidden beneath the dried blood and mud. Its silver coat reflected the dim afternoon light with quiet elegance, and the ancient markings beneath its skin pulsed faintly like distant stars hidden beneath flowing water. Beyond the village road, the sound of approaching horses gradually echoed through the valley. Heavy hoofbeats grew louder with each passing second, and the hooded traveler slowly lifted his eyes toward the distant mountain path. A royal escort was finally arriving, but as he looked back toward the young Omega and the awakening guardian, he realized they had already become the center of a destiny that no king, no prophecy, and no kingdom would ever again be able to ignore. The steady rhythm of approaching hoofbeats rolled through the valley until every conversation in Black Hollow faded into uneasy silence. Villagers instinctively stepped away from the muddy road as a line of royal riders emerged through the thinning rain, their dark horses moving with calm precision beneath polished silver banners bearing the crest of the northern kingdom. Their arrival transformed the atmosphere at once. The frightened whispers that had surrounded the mysterious creature now gave way to cautious anticipation. Emily Carter remained inside the iron enclosure, unaware that every pair of eyes had shifted between the magnificent silver beast beside her and the approaching escort. She simply continued rinsing another clean cloth before carefully wiping away the last remaining stains from the creature's shoulder. As warm water flowed across its coat, the hidden markings no longer disappeared beneath the rain. Ancient silver symbols stretched gracefully across its powerful body, glowing with a quiet radiance that resembled moonlight reflected upon still water. They pulsed slowly, each gentle glow brighter than the one before. The hooded traveler standing beneath the ancient oak tree watched every symbol emerge with growing certainty. Years of searching forgotten ruins and studying faded legends had prepared him for this moment, yet witnessing it with his own eyes left him speechless. He recognized every marking. They belonged not to an ordinary beast, nor to a creature born of the wilderness. They belonged to the guardian of the first moon, an ancient protector believed to have vanished generations earlier. The royal escort finally reached the village square and came to a respectful stop. Their captain dismounted first, carefully surveying the unusual scene before speaking. "We are searching for a sacred guardian reported near these mountains," he announced in a calm voice. "Our king has followed its trail for many years." Several villagers immediately pointed toward the enclosure. "It is in there," one merchant replied nervously, "but the young Omega has been touching it without fear." The captain slowly turned toward the iron cage. The moment his eyes settled upon the glowing silver markings, surprise replaced every trace of confidence. He took one slow step forward before lowering his head with quiet respect. The soldiers standing behind him exchanged uncertain glances, sensing that they were witnessing something far greater than an ordinary royal search. Emily finally noticed the silence surrounding her. She looked up from the wooden bucket, surprised to find an entire royal escort watching her. Embarrassed by the unexpected attention, she carefully set the damp cloth aside and rose to her feet. "I am sorry if I have done something wrong," she said softly. "It was only injured. I wanted to help." Before anyone could answer, the enormous guardian slowly stood. The heavy iron chains around its legs shifted gently across the wet ground, yet the creature showed no sign of anger. Instead, it calmly stepped forward until it stood beside Emily, lowering its great silver head near her shoulder with complete trust. A quiet gasp swept across the square. No command had been spoken. No training had guided its movement. It had chosen to stand beside her freely. The captain looked toward the hooded traveler, whose expression remained calm despite the astonishment surrounding him. Their eyes met for only a brief moment before the traveler gave the smallest nod. The captain immediately understood that the truth was even greater than he had imagined. High above the village, the dark clouds slowly began to separate as pale afternoon sunlight broke through for the first time that day. Golden light spilled across the square, touching the guardian's glowing markings until they shined like living silver. Elderly Rowan, the oldest scholar in Black Hollow, slowly stepped forward with trembling hands and quietly whispered words almost forgotten by time. "The first guardian does not awaken for strength," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "It awakens for the purest heart." Emily looked at the ancient creature beside her with quiet confusion, unable to understand why everyone stared at her as though destiny itself had just spoken her name, while the hooded traveler realized the prophecy had already begun to unfold exactly as the oldest legends had foretold. The afternoon sky slowly cleared above Black Hollow, but the warmth of the returning sunlight did little to quiet the growing unease spreading through the village. The royal escort remained respectfully silent after Elder Rowan spoke the ancient words. Yet the villagers exchanged nervous glances that carried more fear than hope. For generations they had lived beside old stories without believing they would ever become real. Now those forgotten legends stood breathing beside an ordinary young white Omega, whose greatest reputation had been her quiet willingness to help anyone who asked. Emily Carter looked around the crowded square, confused by the sudden attention that followed her every movement. She lowered her eyes modestly and gathered the damp cloths back into her wooden bucket, believing her work was finished. "If the guardian belongs to the kingdom," she said gently, "then perhaps it should be cared for by those who understand it better than I do." Before anyone answered, she stepped toward the open gate of the enclosure. The great silver guardian calmly turned its head and followed. Heavy chains rested loosely around its legs, yet they no longer seemed like restraints. They hung quietly as though the creature had simply accepted them until the proper moment arrived. Emily paused after only a few steps and looked back with a surprised smile. "You should stay here," she whispered kindly. "Your friends have come for you." The guardian did not return to the enclosure. Instead, it slowly walked until it stood once again at her side, lowering its great head beside her shoulder with complete trust. A wave of startled murmurs spread through the crowd. Several villagers quickly backed away while others crossed their arms uneasily. Fear has a way of changing memories, and within moments the same people who had admired Emily's courage began convincing themselves that something unnatural had happened. One farmer spoke first. "It is following her because she awakened something that should have remained asleep." Another villager nodded immediately. "Ever since she touched it, those glowing markings have appeared. None of this happened before." The whispers grew louder until they blended together like another storm rolling through the square. Emily heard fragments of frightened conversations, but struggled to understand them. She had expected gratitude for helping an injured creature, not suspicion. Even so, she refused to answer anger with anger. She simply stood quietly, her hands resting around the wooden bucket while the guardian remained peacefully beside her. Elder Rowan studied both of them with thoughtful eyes. Unlike the others, he noticed what fear prevented them from seeing. The guardian showed no signs of aggression. Its breathing remained slow, Its posture reflected calm rather than dominance. It behaved less like a wild beast and more like an ancient protector choosing where it belonged. The hooded traveler remained silent beneath the old oak tree, allowing the unfolding events to reveal the truth without interference. He understood that destiny could not be forced. It had to be witnessed. The captain of the royal escort took one respectful step toward Emily. "Do not be afraid," he said carefully. "It has chosen to remain beside you of its own will." His words did little to calm the villagers. Fear often speaks louder than reason, especially when old legends begin walking through familiar streets. Emily slowly reached out and rested her fingertips against the guardian's silver neck. The glowing markings beneath its fur pulsed softly beneath her touch before gradually fading into a gentle shimmer. The creature closed its eyes peacefully, almost as though her simple kindness had become the safest place it had known in many years. At that exact moment, a cool mountain breeze carried the scent of pine across the village, and every royal horse lowered its head in quiet respect toward the silver guardian. The hooded traveler finally lifted his gaze toward Emily with calm certainty. The first sign had appeared exactly as the prophecy described, but the greatest revelation had not yet come, and when it did, the entire kingdom would discover that destiny had been waiting in Black Hollow long before anyone realized a king had already arrived. The uneasy silence lingering over Black Hollow was finally broken when the hooded traveler stepped away from the ancient oak tree and walked calmly across the rain-soaked square. Every member of the royal escort immediately lowered their heads before he spoke a single word. Their disciplined movement was quiet, yet unmistakable. The villagers stared in stunned confusion as the captain removed his helmet and knelt respectfully. One by one, every royal soldier followed. Emily Carter blinked in surprise, still holding the wooden bucket in both hands, unable to understand why trained warriors suddenly bowed before an ordinary traveler. The man slowly reached for the edge of his weathered cloak and lowered the hood from his head. Dark hair framed a composed face marked by quiet confidence, while clear blue eyes reflected years of wisdom, hidden beneath remarkable restraint. He carried no jeweled crown, no ceremonial robes, and no display of authority beyond the calm certainty in his presence. Even so, every royal knight remained on one knee. The captain spoke first, his voice steady with respect. "Your Majesty." A wave of astonishment swept across the square. Several villagers gasped aloud while others instinctively lowered their eyes. Elder Rowan gently placed one hand over his heart. "The Alpha King," he whispered with quiet reverence. Emily stood completely still. She had expected a messenger, perhaps a nobleman, but never the ruler of the Northern Kingdom himself. Embarrassed that she had unknowingly stood before him without proper greeting, she carefully set down the wooden bucket and offered a respectful bow. "Your Majesty, I did not recognize you," she said softly. "Please forgive my mistake." Ethan Blackwood, the Alpha King, answered with a warm smile that carried neither pride nor judgment. "There is nothing to forgive," he replied. "You treated everyone here exactly the same, and that tells me far more about your character than any formal greeting ever could." His words eased the tension around Emily, though the villagers remained uncertain. Ethan slowly turned toward the magnificent silver guardian. The ancient creature raised its great head and quietly met his gaze. For several long seconds neither moved. The entire village watched in complete silence, expecting the guardian to walk toward its king. Instead, the creature calmly stepped closer to Emily until its silver shoulder rested beside her. It lowered its head once again, choosing the same place it had returned to every time she moved away. Another ripple of disbelief spread through the crowd. Even the royal captain struggled to hide his surprise. Ethan observed the guardian carefully before a faint smile returned to his face. There was no disappointment in his expression, only quiet understanding. "So the legends were true," he said almost to himself. Elder Rowan nodded slowly. "The guardian recognizes the heart before it recognizes the throne." Emily looked from the guardian to the king with gentle confusion. "I do not understand," she admitted. "I only cleaned its wounds because no one else wished to." Ethan's blue eyes rested on her with sincere admiration. "That is exactly why this matters," he answered. "Power commands obedience. Kindness earns trust. The guardian has always known the difference." A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine through the square as sunlight reflected across the guardian's glowing silver markings. For the first time in generations, the ancient protector stood peacefully between the Alpha King and an ordinary white Omega without fear or conflict. Ethan quietly understood that his long search had never truly been for the guardian alone. Somewhere within the oldest prophecies lay another truth still waiting to reveal itself, and as he looked at Emily standing beside the magnificent creature with humble grace, he sensed that destiny had already begun weaving their lives together in ways neither of them could yet imagine. As evening settled over Black Hollow, the last golden light disappeared behind the mountains, leaving the village wrapped in the quiet glow of lanterns and the first silver rays of a rising full moon. No one returned home. The villagers remained gathered in the square, unable to look away from the extraordinary sight before them. Emily Carter stood beside the ancient guardian while Alpha King Ethan Blackwood spoke softly with Elder Rowan near the old stone well. Neither man raised his voice. Some conversations carried too much weight to disturb with urgency. Elder Rowan carefully unrolled a weathered parchment protected inside a worn leather case. Its faded surface displayed symbols almost identical to the glowing markings now visible beneath the guardian's silver fur. Ethan studied every line with calm concentration. "The prophecy has survived," he said quietly. Elder Rowan nodded. Most believed it was only a legend. They remembered the guardian but forgot the reason it would return. Ethan lifted his eyes toward Emily, who remained completely unaware that the discussion centered around her. She had filled another bucket with fresh water, and now offered it to the royal horses before thinking of herself. Even after everything that had happened, she continued serving others without expecting recognition. Elder Rowan smiled gently. "That is why the guardian chose her. Compassion has always been the first sign." As the moon climbed higher above the valley, the silver markings across the guardian's body began shining more brightly than ever before. Their soft glow reflected across the wet stones of the square until the entire village seemed bathed in quiet moonlight. The air itself felt different, carrying a peaceful stillness that invited everyone to remain silent. Emily noticed the changing light and slowly turned toward the great creature beside her. "You look beautiful tonight," she whispered with an honest smile. The guardian lowered its head in response, and the glowing symbols expanded across its shoulders in graceful patterns that resembled flowing streams of silver light. Every royal soldier watched in respectful silence. Ethan stepped forward carefully, stopping several feet away. He had spent years searching for this ancient protector, yet he understood that this moment did not belong to him. It belonged to the quiet young woman whose kindness had awakened something forgotten by history. Elder Rowan slowly began reciting the oldest words preserved within the ancient parchment. His voice carried gently through the cool evening air. "When the first moon rises above the faithful heart, the guardian shall remember its promise. It shall reveal the path that neither power nor pride can ever discover." As the final words faded into silence, the guardian lifted its face toward the brilliant full moon. The glowing markings across its silver coat became radiant, illuminating the square with soft white light. The heavy iron chains that had remained around its legs quietly loosened and slipped onto the ground without force, as though they had simply fulfilled their purpose. No fear followed. No destruction came. The guardian stood peacefully, freer than before yet gentler than ever. Emily instinctively rested one hand against its shoulder. The brilliant light surrounding the ancient creature immediately softened beneath her touch, until it became warm and comforting instead of overwhelming. Ethan watched the moment with quiet wonder. Every lesson he had learned as Alpha King told him that strength commanded loyalty, yet the guardian had revealed a far older truth. Trust was never earned through authority alone. It was given freely to those who chose kindness when no reward could be expected. As the moonlight continued washing over the village, the guardian slowly turned its gaze from the heavens toward Ethan. For the first time that evening, the ancient protector looked directly into the Alpha King's eyes before gently shifting its attention back to Emily. Ethan understood the silent message without a single word being spoken. The prophecy had not ended with the guardian's awakening. It had only begun, and somewhere beyond this peaceful night, waited a destiny that would forever unite the future of the kingdom with the humble heart of the woman standing beside the ancient light. Moonlight rested gently across Black Hollow long after the ancient chains had fallen away, yet no one spoke above a whisper. The village square felt transformed into sacred ground where every breath carried the weight of history. Emily Carter stood quietly beside the silver guardian, still unable to understand why everyone looked toward her with such wonder. To her, nothing had changed inside her own heart. She had simply helped someone who had been suffering. The guardian remained at her side, its radiant markings glowing with a peaceful light that neither blinded nor frightened. Instead, the gentle brilliance seemed to calm every frightened horse, every anxious child, and even the restless wind moving through the surrounding pines. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood slowly stepped forward until he stood before the gathered villagers. His royal escort respectfully formed a silent line behind him, while Elder Rowan remained nearby holding the ancient parchment close against his chest. Ethan allowed the silence to settle before speaking. His voice was calm, carrying neither accusation nor pride, only quiet conviction. Today every one of us has witnessed something greater than power, he began. Many believed courage belonged only to warriors, rulers, or those born into noble blood. Yet the guardian did not awaken because someone displayed strength. It awakened because one ordinary woman chose compassion when everyone else chose fear. The villagers lowered their eyes as his words settled over the square. Ethan continued without raising his voice. No law commanded Emily Carter to enter that enclosure. No reward waited for her. She expected nothing in return for her kindness. That is why the oldest promise answered her instead of the rest of us. Emily looked down with quiet embarrassment, wishing the attention would return to the guardian rather than herself. She had never imagined standing before a king, much less hearing him speak her name with such respect. Elder Rowan smiled gently as he watched her humble reaction. It confirmed everything the ancient writings had preserved. True humility never recognized its own worth. Ethan turned toward the magnificent guardian. "Protector of the first moon," he said softly, "you have reminded this kingdom of a truth we nearly forgot." The guardian lifted its silver head and calmly met the Alpha King's gaze. Then, before the astonished villagers, it slowly walked in a graceful circle around Emily before returning to stand beside her once again. There was no hesitation in its movement. No uncertainty remained. It had made its choice clear enough for every witness to understand. Quiet emotion spread through the crowd. The same merchant who had begged Emily not to enter the enclosure slowly stepped forward, removing his hat with sincere regret. "Miss Carter," he said gently, "I judged you because I was afraid. I am sorry." One by one, other villagers offered quiet apologies of their own. None of them had expected forgiveness, yet Emily answered each apology with the same gentle smile that had guided her through the entire day. "Fear makes all of us forget who we wish to become sometimes," she replied softly. "What matters is what we choose after that." Ethan heard her words and felt something shift quietly within his heart. He had ruled kingdoms, settled disputes, and carried responsibilities beyond counting. Yet the simple wisdom spoken by the humble Omega carried greater strength than many royal decrees. The full moon shone brighter above the valley as a soft breeze stirred the guardian's silver fur. Its glowing markings briefly reflected across Emily's hands before fading into a peaceful shimmer. Elder Rowan carefully looked once more at the ancient parchment. A final line, almost invisible beneath centuries of fading ink, slowly revealed itself beneath the moonlight. His eyes widened with quiet amazement as he whispered words meant only for himself. "The guardian chooses the heart," he breathed, "but the moon chooses the mate." Ethan looked toward Emily at that exact moment, and although neither of them understood the full meaning of the prophecy yet, destiny had already begun drawing two lives together beneath the silent witness of the ancient moon. The village remained wrapped in silver moonlight as Elder Rowan slowly closed the ancient parchment, protecting its final words from the cool night breeze. Although he spoke no further explanation, the quiet wonder upon his face lingered in everyone's thoughts. Emily Carter noticed the elderly scholar watching her with gentle kindness, but she still believed there had been some misunderstanding. She was only a washerwoman from Black Hollow. The idea that ancient prophecies could somehow involve her felt impossible. She looked toward Alpha King Ethan Blackwood with quiet uncertainty. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "if the guardian belongs to the kingdom, then it should remain with you. I only happened to be here when it needed help." Ethan smiled with calm understanding. "The guardian does belong to the kingdom," he answered. But it has never belonged to any single ruler. It has always chosen for itself. Before Emily could reply, the magnificent silver guardian slowly stepped forward until it stood directly between her and the Alpha King. Every eye in the square followed the graceful movement. The ancient creature raised its powerful head toward the bright full moon as the glowing markings across its silver coat shimmered with renewed brilliance. The peaceful light spread across the village stones like gentle ripples flowing across a quiet lake. Then, with remarkable dignity, the guardian slowly lowered itself onto one knee before Emily. A hushed silence swept across Black Hollow. No one breathed. No one dared interrupt the sacred moment unfolding before them. The guardian bowed its head with complete trust, offering not obedience but recognition. Emily instinctively placed one trembling hand upon its silver forehead. Warm light surrounded her fingertips, flowing gently across the guardian's glowing markings before drifting into the night air like tiny stars carried by the breeze. There was no fear in the moment, only overwhelming peace. The villagers who had doubted her earlier quietly lowered their own heads, recognizing that they were witnessing something no generation before them had ever seen. Elder Rowan smiled through grateful eyes. "The guardian has spoken without words," he whispered. "Its choice is complete." Ethan remained perfectly still as he watched the ancient protector kneeling before the humble Omega. Deep within his heart, pieces of the oldest prophecy finally began fitting together. He had spent years believing his journey centered upon finding the guardian. Instead, the guardian had patiently led him toward someone whose kindness had quietly transformed destiny itself. Emily looked toward Ethan with gentle confusion. "I have done nothing extraordinary," she said honestly. "I simply wanted to help." Ethan stepped closer, stopping a respectful distance away. His expression reflected admiration rather than authority. "That is exactly what makes this extraordinary," he replied. "Many people search for greatness through power. You found it through compassion without ever searching at all." The moonlight brightened once more, softly illuminating both of them, while the guardian remained peacefully kneeling between them. For a brief moment, Emily noticed an unfamiliar warmth settle quietly within her heart as she met Ethan's blue eyes. It was not overwhelming or frightening. It felt strangely familiar, as though two distant paths had finally crossed after years of traveling toward the same destination. Ethan sensed the quiet connection as well, though neither of them fully understood its meaning. Elder Rowan looked up toward the brilliant full moon and spoke one final sentence for all to hear. "Tonight the guardian fulfilled its promise," he said. "Soon the moon will fulfill its own." A gentle wind moved through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and fresh rain while the silver guardian peacefully rose to its feet. It stood beside Emily once again before calmly turning toward Ethan, as though inviting both of them to continue a journey that had only just begun, one that would soon reveal why fate had patiently woven their lives together long before either of them ever arrived in Black Hollow. Several months passed, and the memory of that extraordinary night became more than a story whispered around fireplaces. It became the beginning of a quieter, kinder season for Black Hollow. Autumn painted the valley in rich shades of amber and crimson, while cool mountain breezes carried the scent of pine through streets that no longer felt divided by fear. Travelers arrived from distant towns to see the village where the ancient guardian had awakened once more. Yet they often discovered that the greatest wonder was not the legend itself, but the people whose hearts had changed because of it. Emily Carter continued living with the same quiet humility that had always guided her life. She still greeted every neighbor with a warm smile, still offered help before anyone needed to ask, and still believed kindness should never depend upon recognition. The only difference was that now every greeting was returned with genuine respect. Children who had once hidden behind their parents now ran happily beside her, and the villagers who had once questioned her courage often sought her advice whenever disagreements arose. She accepted every conversation with the same gentle grace, never reminding anyone of the mistakes they had made. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood visited Black Hollow often during the following months, though never with unnecessary ceremony. Sometimes he arrived accompanied by his royal escort, and other times he came with only a single trusted companion. Each visit allowed him to learn more about the woman whose compassion had quietly fulfilled an ancient promise. They walked through the village together, spoke with farmers, shared simple meals beneath old oak trees, and listened to Elder Rowan tell forgotten stories that now carried new meaning. Their friendship grew naturally, built upon mutual respect, shared purpose, and countless quiet conversations that revealed the strength hidden within gentle hearts. The Silver Guardian remained near the village only until the first snowfall touched the distant mountain peaks. On one peaceful morning, it walked with calm purpose toward the forest where the oldest pines reached into the clouds. Emily and Ethan followed together until they reached the edge of the ancient woods. The Guardian turned one final time, its silver markings glowing softly beneath the pale winter sunlight. It lowered its great head toward Emily with familiar trust before looking at Ethan with quiet approval. Neither farewell required words. Some promises were understood by the heart alone. With graceful steps, the ancient protector disappeared among the towering trees, leaving only peaceful silence behind. Elder Rowan watched from a nearby hillside and smiled. "Its work was never to remain," he said softly. "Its work was to remind us what truly matters." The seasons continued changing, yet the lessons born in Black Hollow endured far beyond the village itself. Throughout the Northern Kingdom, people began repeating a simple truth that spread from home to home, from market to marketplace, until it reached even the royal capital. They spoke not only of an ancient guardian or a remarkable prophecy, but of a humble woman whose kindness had accomplished what fear never could. One quiet evening beneath another brilliant full moon, Ethan and Emily stood overlooking the valley where everything had begun. The village lights shimmered below like scattered stars, while the surrounding mountains rested peacefully beneath the night sky. Ethan gently offered his hand, and Emily accepted it with a warm smile that carried complete trust. Neither of them hurried toward tomorrow, because both understood that the strongest bonds were never forced by destiny alone. They were strengthened every day through patience, compassion, and shared hope. Above them, the moon shone with quiet approval, and somewhere deep within the ancient forest, a faint silver glow briefly appeared before fading into the trees once more, leaving behind a timeless reminder that true strength is always gentle, and the greatest destinies often begin with one simple act of kindness.